Welcome to Champlain Maker Fair show, Makers on Screen. I'm your host, Doug Webster, and today's show is the Flute Maker. Since the launch of Vermont's first Maker Fair, Champlain Maker Fair in 2012, there's been a surge of interest in making of all kinds. My guest today is the Flute Maker himself, Brian Merrill. Brian has an interesting story of how he became a flute maker. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Great. Hey, could you tell us what you make specifically? What do you make?
Sure. Currently, I'm making a Native American style flute. And what I have in my hand is an example of a more traditional form of that instrument. I started, you want to kind of lead into some of the history there?
Yeah,
sure.
Go for it. Yeah.
I'm a craftsman and primarily woodworker. Focused a lot of attention on making furniture, high-end furniture. And I always wanted to make an instrument, and I'm not musical by nature and or by education, but I had a desire to make an instrument, and I met a flute maker who lives in Vermont. His name is Werner John, at a craft fair on the waterfront in Burlington many years ago, probably 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
And I became intrigued with the flute and started to do a little bit of research online at the time, and kind of got it in my head that I might be able to make one. And I picked up, through the internet, a small little book, great little paperback book by Lou Paxton Price. It's called Creating and Using the Native American Love Flute. And this little book has all the instructions in terms of how to make the flute, but also some great history of the courting flute or love flute, and even some facts about how our brains work, and that the sound waves, the frequencies that come from playing the instrument, affect us in a way that supports us being in the alpha state. And so all of that really intrigued me and kind of began my journey of making this style of instrument.
Wow. Hey, so what kind of material is that there? Is that
this flute
not wood?
This flute is eastern red cedar, or it's western red cedar and eastern red cedar for the totem or fetish. That's this piece that is carved.
Excellent.
So it is wooden.
Yeah. So when you first got into flute making, you said that you were working in woodworking in a different field. What were some of the skills that you brought with you to to making flutes?
Sure. Along with making furniture, I'm kind of go back a little further in my history, and that was I first moved to Vermont in 1991. I started a business carving rocking horses that were based on Victorian-style rocking horses, but I was making them so that they were functional for children to use. And so that brought in more of a kind of a skilled craft in carving into my skill set. And so along with the early experience of making those products and the addition of really moving into furniture, I just brought many years of becoming familiar with tools and processes, and that allowed me to very easily move into making the flute. Now, actually making a flute that sounds good is a whole nother subject.
Yeah. Now, what's the trick to making it sound good?
For me, lots and lots of practice and experimentation. This instrument it's a fipple style flute, and in the nature of the Native American style, and I call it Native American style because I'm not Native American, so I really want to honor that tradition and their practice. And that is that it's a two-chambered flute. It has a pre-chamber in the back, and then the sound chamber. And what the trick in making this instrument work well and sound decent is the area that they call the nest. And essentially, this one in particular I hand carved. There's a hole that comes up through the body of the flute, and there's a solid section of wood they call the plug that separates the back chamber from the front chamber. And I'll go back to the hole. So the air passes up through this hole, And when you add the totem or the fetish onto the body of the flute, a very shallow channel is created for the air to flow through. And as that very narrow flow of air passes over, this is called the true sound hole, that's actually where the sound is created. And so in order to be able to have a flute that plays well, all of these elements need to be very carefully created, and they have specific dimensions that they need to exist in order to work. So does that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We have a video, I think Gary, is it?
Gary Strautsos.
Okay, Gary Strautsos. Okay. Yeah.
Who's from Vermont West, and he visits Vermont annually. He gives concerts here in our region, and this video that you'll see is Gary playing one of my newer style of flutes that we'll talk about at a concert. It was over the summer at the Round Church in Richmond.
Oh, okay,
Vermont.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look.
So Gary had never played this particular style of flute
Yeah.
that I'm making before, but he was really wonderful in being open to bringing it right into his show and giving it a shot. And it was exciting for me to have someone who really plays professionally test it out, and he really
Right.
put it to the test.
Yeah, put it right in concert there.
Yeah.
Hey, great. Yeah. Now, do you see these this as a business, as flutes
Well,
that you'll be selling eventually, or you do sell now?
Yeah,
or?
I mean, I do sell them, and it's
Yeah.
kind of the interesting discussion in the context of the makerspace and the kinds of things that evolve.
It's a Burlington generator.
Thank you. Yes.
Makerspace. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
To
Yeah.
be specific.
Yeah.
And I've been a member of the generator for over 3 years now.
Right. Right.
And I've been working on the flute project for a couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so initially I'll go to the, really in my early experience of making the flutes, was that I was trying to find something that would truly be a hobby. Because I've spent so many years making things that products to sell.
Yeah.
I wanted to try and focus my attention on something that I wouldn't push in that direction, that I would do and just enjoy the process of.
Right.
And this instrument really does represent that for me. For the past 15 years, really, I've done that, and I have sold them, but I haven't really treated them as something that I would create as a business.
Right.
The unique experience of being at the generator for me is that I had access to new equipment that I hadn't had available before, such as the laser cutter in particular. And by having access to that equipment, it had given me the ability to come up with a whole new concept for making this instrument, which is what we have here. And as that new concept has evolved, and the uniqueness of what I'm able to do by using the laser to create the parts of the flute has moving me in the direction of thinking about forming a business, an official business, and marketing this product. So I went from the idea of creating something that I wouldn't push as a product to really finding an opportunity where now it makes a lot of sense for me to really consider this as a possibility.
All right,
it's a
great.
probability.
Yeah. Yeah.
High probability.
Yeah. Well, good. Good for you. Good for you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Now, speaking of the process, we do have some pictures we want to bring up, and
Sure.
if you want to walk people through this,
Yeah.
let's take a look at some of those pictures.
This is just a show in Burlington. The Maker was actually the conference
Yes.
that I
Yeah.
attended.
Maker
and so-
Places Conference.
Maker
back in
Places
August.
Conference. Yeah, it was a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and I set up a table there and had some flutes on display. Got a lot of interest. Most people really weren't even sure what they are, and that made me happy because it was fun to explain that it was actually a woodwind instrument and it was something new that didn't exist until now. While at the generator, I've met a professor at Norwich University who's an electrical engineering professor His name is Michael Prairie. It was fun to discover that he's also a Native American flute maker. And he is using the principles that he's learned in designing an electrical engineering field and applying the science and the math to designing flutes. And what you see here is a prototype that we're working on, and it's an experiment to see if we can create an end-blown flute in a whole new form. And what you see are the parts before I've assembled them. And he now has this flute and is working on fine-tuning it.
And what kind of adhesive do you use?
I'm using Type Bond 2 glue, which is a common woodworking glue. It works quite well for it. Yeah. So that's just a close-up of this new design that we're working on. And I'll point out that the circular elements that you see in the image, they're just temporary. I've come up with a system that allows me to laser cut the parts and introduce the circular elements as a way to register each layer together, and then I put bolts through the holes, the center holes, and actually clamp the body of the flute together. And then once the glue has set, I cut all of those circular pieces out so that then the interior of the flute becomes hollow.
I see.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Now, as you go around the perimeter of the flute, would you have edges inside there that would change the harmonics at all, or is it?
Potentially, and then that last image shows the current one of the current designs that I'm working on, which is a representation here. That's back again. So again, what you see, those are the parts that will become the flute body, and the circular elements will be removed once the glue is set. Oh, here we go. And so to answer your question is that I am gluing layers of pieces together, and the interior I sand. So I can sand it smooth and address the edges that might come up.
So you can sand half of it and then the other half and then piece it together from there, and then would you have access to it?
Yes.
I'm just this is engineering me, just
no,
very curious
absolutely.
about
this. The last step of creating the body of the flute is to glue the sides on. So I have access to the interior up until that point.
Up until that point.
And that's the very last stage.
All right, good. All right. We have a couple more photos here, I think. All right, there's that one.
So this is a shot of my studio at the generator, and the generator has just really been this awesome nonprofit business that has allowed me to join as a member and rent a studio space. It's 7 by 8 feet, I think, and I've been able to create an area that both allows me to display the flutes as I make them, but also do some of the fine work inside that space. And so this is a representation of what that looks like if you come visit us, and please do.
Great, great. All right.
There are 21 studios in the generator like mine.
21, yeah. And all kinds of different products and projects and so forth.
A wide range, from fine art to drones to flutes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Great. Now, as far as the getting other people involved with making and so forth, what is your role with that? I mean, I know you have interest in doing something down at Vermont Steam Space at Vermont Teddy Bear. What would you like to see happen when it comes to educating, both youth and adults in the art of making?
You know, the most important thing is just to make it accessible and to create environments where people feel safe to think creatively and to actively try some of these opportunities. I mean, in its base form. The beauty of coming to the generator is actually seeing it happen. There are interactions every day that are really quite exciting, where somebody's working on something, you have an opportunity to kind of step in and hear what they're doing, give them some feedback if you have anything to offer.
So a big, you mentioned earlier you have access to the technology, but just as important, you have access to the people, and you can collaborate in the community of other people and ideas and techniques and so forth that you can pick up where you wouldn't normally pick up if you weren't in that space.
No, it's so
Yeah.
true, and all
Yeah.
the maker spaces really are offering that in some degree. And I mean, in my career and life history, really, I've worked to always have a place that I could make in, whether it was the furniture, the rocking horses, and the flutes. I always needed a physical space to do that, and I didn't always have the means or the ability to support maintaining that, especially when it moved into a hobby form. And that's what's wonderful about the maker spaces and the generator here locally, is that for a really relatively low investment monthly, I have access to not only physical space, but all of the equipment that's available for me to use there that allows me to do these things.
That's excellent. Good. Well, great. You're going to show us one of these. You're going to play a tune.
Sure. Yeah.
Which one are you using here? Yeah, that one there.
Yeah, and in forming these and using the laser cutter to make them, I've been able to really experiment a lot with both the shape of the flutes, but also working into flutes that are lower keys. And traditionally that would be they're difficult to make and play. And just, to hold this one up and play it, you can see that in changing the form, for me, it actually becomes more comfortable, kind of more ergonomic to play it, where traditionally you'd hold it up in front of you.
Right, you got it
now
coming
I can
to
hold
you,
it down.
meeting you.
That's right,
Yeah.
and that's true for a couple of these other models where I'm getting into the lower key instruments. The sound chamber is much longer, and the longer the sound chamber becomes, the further the spacing of the finger holes increases
And the
also. And
bigger
so
the
it's very challenging.
hands.
That's that too.
would be.
So
would
here
be
we
a good
go.
thing.
We'll play a little bit with this
Great.
one.
Well, thank you. Excellent, excellent, great. Well, thank you for being on the show, Brian.
Oh, Doug, thanks for having me here.
All right,
It was a lot of fun.
Good. For more information about this show, related internet links, and other shows in this series, go to retn.org and look for Makers. Thank you for joining us.